Peace, peace, people. Welcome back to your Mima's World, the Jelly Musa Cafe. I am your hostess with the mostest, your Mima, and it is good to be black in the land of the living once again. Welcome to another episode of Lunchtime Storytelling with your Mima. So we're going to get into another book today, and you can see on the thumbnail. The book is called The Glass Bottle Tree. So we're going to get into it and we're going to see what they're talking about. Now, this book is called The Glass Bottle Tree. It is written by Evelyn Coleman and illustrated by Gail Gordon Carter. And I'm going to read the dedications and author's note and everything else in the book because I think that's important. All right, so dedication from the author to my grandmother, the late Mary Saunders, my daughters, Travaria and Latranya, and all the children who grew up with unconditional love in non traditional families. And then the illustrator, excuse me, dedicated it to the memory of Leona, Bertha, and Dora, to grandmothers and grandmother figures everywhere. And this is the author's note. As a child, while riding in a car in the deep south, I saw a tree with colorful bottles stuck on its limbs. My grandmother told me the bottles were to hold the spirits of our ancestors, an African American belief spirited all the way from Africa. I fashioned my own glass bottle tree when I got home so that I could talk to my ancestors. The practice of creating glass bottles trees has diminished with time. However, Julie Dash displays a glass bottle tree in her movie Daughters of the Dust. I hope that even today you might be lucky enough to see one traveling dusty roads in the Deep South. Or maybe you'll make your own, as I did, in order to talk to your ancestors. All right, let's get into it. Once upon a time, once upon a summer's breeze, way down in the country, a little girl lived peacefully with her grandmother. They lived in a rickety old house with a makeshift pickety fence down a long, dusty road. And smack dab in the middle of their yard was an old tree. This was no ordinary tree, for the old grandmother believed spirits lived in it. Old spirits from far away and near. Spirits with good thoughts, some with mistaken thoughts, and spirits that seemed like they had no thoughts at all. All spirits of the family. Sometimes those old spirits would get to laughing and arguing and telling stories to the little girl until they'd get so riled up they'd stir up the wind. Everything in the grandmother's yard would then become a whirling, swirling mess of kin. And so one day, the grandmother decided to put all the spirits inside bottles so they'd get a hold of themselves and behave. She took her granddaughter by the hand and showed her how to place the bottles on the limbs of the old tree, like her grandmother had done before her. Grandmothers knew how to keep spirits quiet. Then she and the little girl went about their daily business, but not before the grandmother noticed the reeds in the fields bending low to the ground and the grasshoppers singing their warning song. She knew a terrible storm was brewing, even if there wasn't one cloud in the sky. Yes, sirree, trouble was on the way. Early in the mornings, with the thud of a hoe and the twill of a tiller and the drop of a seed and the rhythmic bending of knees, it wasn't long before the grandmother taught the little girl how to make vegetables and flowers sprout up to reach for the sun without saying one word to her. In the evenings at the banks of the river, with a dip and a bob and a swishing of arms and a kicking of legs, the grandmother soon taught the little girl to swim without the swish of a sound alongside a rainbow colored brim. After supper, sitting in front of the fireplace, with a twist of wrists and the fold of fingers, the clicking of four long needles through colorful yarns, the grandmother taught the little girl to knit a winter blanket without speaking one solitary word. On Sundays, with butterflies on their shoulders, blue jays eating from their hands, bees whispering near their ears, and animals snuggled close, the grandmother taught the little girl to enjoy a simple picnic without either of them opening their mouths. Every night before bed, they silently told each other good night. In the stillness, they waited for the cricket's lullaby to put them to sleep. The grandmother and the little girl were very happy until the day some folk who worked for the state came. They came to discuss the little girl who lived in the rickety old house with the pickety fence down the long, long, dusty road. After visiting with the little girl and her grandmother, and observing neither of them being much for talking, the state's folks reasoned that the little girl would be much better off living with a well to do family in a beautiful yuppity house. One where there's a mother, a father, two children who all talk to one another a lot. There would definitely be no pet mouse or chickens or any goats lingering about. And above all, no weird tree growing in the yard with silly glass bottles stuck all over it. The grandmother's too old to keep the little girl, one said. Why, she's so old she can't see good. She can't hear good either, said the other. And it seems like she might not be able to talk. She never says a word, said the first. I'm sure the little girl will feel better in a real family. So they decided. They hadn't noticed the things the grandmother taught the little girl to see, to hear, and do. They hadn't heard the talk the grandmother taught the little girl to talk without using her voice. And they sure never recognized the love the grandmother and the little girl shared. So in the fall's breeze, the folks who worked for the state returned. They came down the long, long, now muddy road. This time, they came for the little girl. The grandmother sat on her rickety porch, rocking in her chair. Trouble done come, she sighed. But she kept right on rocking, even after they bundled the little girl up and stepped off into the muddy yard. The grandmother never once lifted her eyes, nor opened her ears, nor said one single solitary word. She only felt great sadness as she heard her granddaughter crying. So she spoke to the spirits in the tree. She spoke to them with a ritual, rocking and humming, and rocking and humming, and rocking and humming some more. A ritual her grandmother had taught her long ago. Well, the state's folk, convinced by the grandmother's strange behavior that they were doing the right thing, they were about to wave goodbye to the grandmother when the animals, the old tree, and the spirits of the family heard the little girls crying and the grandmother's rocking, humming, pining. But the state's folk couldn't hear the grandmother. They were just standing there, frowning in disgust at her rocking in that chair so wildly. Suddenly, the spirits in that old tree in its bottles started swaying back, forth, back, and forth, back, and forth some more. Those bottles started jingling and jangling and clinking and clanging and wiggling and waggling like they were going to jump right off the tree. And they did. And then the wind began to howl, and the spirits that had been held inside the glass bottles commenced to prowl. The spirits jumped from one person to another and flung those states folks here and there and everywhere. By the time everything had settled down and the last tinkle had tinkled, and the states folks were lying outside the rickety old fence like worn out rag dolls. Well, well, one spoke in a tiny voice. I believe that the old woman has the best eyesight I've ever seen. Me too, said the other. Well, she can hear better than any person I know. You're right, you're right, said the first one, trembling so badly his knees was knocking together. And she always know the right thing to say. Indeed, she did. The old woman hobbled down off the porch. and waved goodbye. After that, she picked up the little girl and looked into her eyes and told her, "I love you." The little girl answered back, "I love you too, grandmother." And neither one of them had opened their mouths. And the glass bottle tree didn't open his mouth either, because the grandmother began putting the bottles back before the spirits could get all riled up, gossiping about their latest adventure. As the grandmother watched the little girl place the last bottle on the tree, she wore a big smile. She knew the little girl had learned one more thing about her family. And as the state's folks headed down the long, long country road, they agreed between themselves never to come back for the little girl again without either of them opening their mouth. All right, so that was the glass bottle tree. Now, I don't know if you have seen these. I'm from the South, and I'm from Virginia, but I have never seen these, or I don't remember ever seeing them. It's a possibility that I have seen them because I'm from the country. I was raised on a farm, and I'm not too far from North Carolina, and I have family in North Carolina. But I've never seen the glass bottle trees before, and I learned of it when I started doing history presentations and learning about my ancestry and things of that nature. But there are so many things that stick out in this book for me. Not so much the glass bottle tree, but the fact that the little girl was living with her grandmother. So the book doesn't tell us what happened to her mother and father. It just says she was being raised by her grandmother, which a lot of us were. In the South, a lot of times the parents would migrate north and they would leave their children in the South until they were old enough to move to the North. And that may have been her case in the book. I don't know. I'm just giving it kind of a backstory of my experience. And the grandmother to white people seemed to be strange because she didn't speak, because she had this glass bottle tree out in her yard, and they thought that she was a strange person. And so they came to take her child, her grandchild from her. Now, my my great grandmother was institutionalized. She was institutionalized at the Petersburg, and they used to call it the Asylum for the Insane or the Insane Asylum. But back in the early 1900s and the late 1800s, they would put people in the insane asylum, black people, because it was black up until the 50s or 60s. But they would put them in there for stupid reasons, for not having a job, for just being a vagrant. Um, and then one reason they would put them there was for what they call religious excitement, meaning that they were not adhering to westernized Christianity. And that's what my great grandmother was institutionalized for having quote unquote strange ways. Unfortunately, she died there. And my grandmother was 21 at the time. And her sister, my grandmother's sister, was about 19, 19 at the time. My father was 18 months old. And my great grandmother died on July 6th and was buried on the 8th. So I don't even know if my grandmother even had a chance to bury her mother. But what people call strange is culture. And in this book, The Glass Bottle Tree, it was the grandmother's culture. And it is African American culture. And we need to stop running away from our culture because it is our culture that keeps us safe. And it's when we step outside of our culture, it's when we start to be get into trouble and don't have that um, intelligence to reach back and ask the culture for help. But in this particular story, the grandmother had sense enough to reach back and to get the spirits to help her. Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed the glass bottle tree. I think what I'm going to do is um, maybe make my own. When the next time I go to my parents' home in Mecklenburg County, I'm gonna see if I can find like a tree and bring it home and put it on my balcony and put the glass bottles on it. I don't know. I'm gonna see if I can do it. And if you don't have one, I hope that it inspires you to make your own glass bottle tree, so that that can be another form of of communicating with the ancestors. All right, y'all. So until next time, to next story time, lunchtime story time. I will see you next time. And you know the drill. Love yourself, love each other, give yourself some grace, give others some grace. Stay healthy, stay safe, and stay black.